I think the whole thing is very carefully constructed. Norris is very deft at how he builds in each moment. But the second act, in particular, with the way that the jokes cascade, and Tyla, I know that you were telling Michael that you've had some very interesting responses to what goes on in that second act.
And can we give her a hand?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I went to our talk back last Tuesday, I think it was last Tuesday, and it was a lovely talk back, and I love them. I wish they could go on longer, that we had more, because I love talking to the audience and seeing how they feel about the experience that they had. And one lady was very upset. She was livid. She thought the play was, and I wish that you had been here, because you probably would have, talked to her more and given her more than I probably gave her. But she was very upset about it, because she did a third of her life, she said, in black countries, and she felt that this play did not really deal with the subject matter, and we didn't talk about what was real in the play. We danced around it, and I thought, well, that's wonderful that you're so angry and that you feel this way, because that's exactly what Bruce Norris is trying to do. He's trying to say that we do that. We talk about everything but what is significant, and we don't have a real conversation about those things that are really important. Instead, we kind of cover them up with our own personal arguments and our own personal issues, but not really talk about what's going on. And then I had a beautiful young a Jewish woman walk up to me, and she said, "I am so grateful for you lifting up the name Gelman and Mr. Wheeler, because she was that Jewish family, the only Jewish family in the community where she did deal with a lot of racism, and she knew owning that store." And she said, well, you know what Mr. Gelman did with that store? He gave it to Mr. Wheeler, and that's how, it was something that she felt happens in her culture all the time. And she knew that Mr. Gelman, when I referred to him as Mr. Gelman was a nice man, and it's a very nice store, that my character, my American Black character, is saying, Mr. Gelman is probably the nicest man in this community to me. And so she heard that little bit of spin that I put on that, because that's what I heard in the writing when I was reading it. And I hold Mr. Wheeler in memory of him, like, oh, he was, no one knew his first name. We just loved him. We didn't need his first name kind of energy. And she heard that, and I thought that was so good, that something that small, someone could hear it and really feel connected to it. And there was another lady who had lived in Chicago. Her parents moved. They were part of White Flight. She knew that world. She retired from being a professional in Chicago, and she knows about the downtown area now being extremely gentrified on the south end of the city. So it was wonderful to have such a wide variety of responses to the play, from anger to joy, and even opening night. I have to say, it's the first time it ever happened to me, and I was so humbled. A woman walked up to say how much she loved the play, and she couldn't stop crying. So the play is doing something, because it's moving people to talk, one, which is what theater should do. And unfortunately, a lot of times theaters stop doing that, because we're so afraid of who we're going to offend, and are we going to lose our subscribers?
You've offended all of Sarasota.
But I did it so nicely, and with a smile, Everybody can take an insult with a smile. So yeah, it's been affecting people wonderfully. So I love the talkbacks. Keep coming.
I want to ask you, was the woman who was so angry, was she black or white?
She was white. She was white, and part of her anger was that she knew that racism was much more heavy-handed, and that, she had worked in a third of her life in the black countries, and how it affects people. And so she felt that it wasn't dealing with it really, and that she was, as one of the characters say, Bev, in the play, I'm ashamed of all of us. And that's how she felt, and I thought, how amazing that you don't realize you're Bev. You're ashamed of everything we're saying, which is the point, so.
Good.
Well, I can tell you where I felt the universality of the story. It was an epiphany. You'll remember this, Tyler. We were rehearsing the opening of the second act. I mean, and the whole intersection of race and property in this play is actually very interesting, because for Tyla's character, it actually is not about race until David Breitbart's character makes it about race. And then the whole first section of Act 2, they're arguing about the property line. What is the perimeter of the property? Does it go to the sidewalk? What is the easement? What is the actual square footage of this property, and how high can the building be in relation to the property? And they argue for nearly 15 minutes about the exact nature of this and what they're entitled to do. And we were kind of going through it, and they were kind of rushing through and throwing away the ends of the lines and so on, making it sound very, very natural indeed. But I said, look, it's incomprehensible to me. If we do it this way, you have to be meticulous and passionate about the point of view. This is the West Bank. This is deciding who owns what and who is entitled to do what, and you want it on paper, and you want it signed off, and it is accepted. Do you remember that? I remember that rehearsal vividly, and we did it again, and it was thrilling. The stakes were enormous, and I thought, okay, this play is about arguing about property and who decides who owns it and who decides what you do with it, regardless of culture or context. Now, but being very specifically Chicago and American makes it vivid and alive and about us. We are all implicated. But that argument, you've all had that. You've all had that argument. One of my sisters in Australia moved into a beautiful working class neighborhood, and they built a beautiful contemporary house, 2 stories high, unlike anything else on the street. The neighbors turned against them, made their lives miserable. Their dog was poisoned, and they sold it and moved away from the neighborhood. They never, because they did not acknowledge that they were doing what Tyla's character says. What's the line you say to Sarah at the end? Sarah, because she tries to make it about race.
Sarah says that their ethics are called into question, and I say we're not questioning your ethics at all. We're questioning your taste.
Which is really the climactic line, climactic line in the play. And it's like, we hope that the penny will drop for most people at that particular point. But it's filled with all this talk about, the racial makeup of neighborhoods in America. But Tyla's argument is always about what is the historical integrity of the place, what are the stories that are represented in these buildings, how do we respect the historical integrity and do new and accommodate change, rather than simply wiping the slate clean and building everything from scratch again.
I think I'll just add a quick thing. I didn't know what I was supposed to do this morning, so I did a lot of research, and I read every single review that I could find about this play. And one line struck me, and I wrote it down, and I probably will not remember it exactly, but it said that this play is about the parameters of the real estate of the mind.
Yes.
And I thought, how beautiful. I wish I had said that myself. And I didn't want to be accused of plagiarism, so I have to give the reviewer credit. But I thought that was what it is. What is in your own head, and what it is that brings what is it. Like the woman who cried, the woman who was angry. Who knows why she was angry? It may not have been any of what she told you. But she's thinking about it now and processing it. And I would have loved to have been there, because I would have found out what was really on her mind.
Tyla, I think you wanted to.
I did.
Well, I did want to talk to her, but it was people were so lovely after, I didn't get a chance to, because I was going to have a lunch date with her, let me tell you. But also, in rehearsal, it was a wonderful process, because I saw this play in Chicago at Steppenwolf Theater, and I told Michael this, that I saw it and I enjoyed the first act tremendously. I cared about those people. I wanted to know more about those 2 characters. And then when Act 2 happened, I wasn't nearly as drawn in, and I left, feeling like, pretty much like the woman that was here. What was the point in that? I don't get it. Now, being inside the body of the play, I challenged myself to examine. There's something in here, because people love it, so there has to be something inside of this that I'm missing, and that I missed as the spectator. And then once I was inside of it and I could really get into the body of the piece, I understood that Act 2 was very much about the perimeters of our mind and how we think. And Act 1, for me, is very much about race. And we had a discussion when we were being interviewed before, and I said to David Breitbart, because he pointed out, well, I don't know, maybe I think it is economics. And I said, no, David, when you can buy in a community, you belong there. If you can purchase the home, then no one should question you being there. And the minute that they start to question or hesitate because they're black, it's about race. Nothing else meant anything to this family in the beginning, or to Carl, I should say. And even Bev and Russ hesitate when they find out the information. They hesitate, and then it fast forwards and they can't deal with that because they've got something else to deal with. But the race issue is the first thing that affects that energy in the first act of the play. But I love that I discovered when we were rehearsing and we were sitting around the table and we did the read-through, and Michael would stop us and say, you know, what are we going to label this scene? What is this called? And I got to my characters, Lena in Act 2, and I read through it and I said, can I do this again? Because I just got it. I had just realized that she was talking about economics. It didn't matter if you were Hispanic or Asian or whatever, I was talking about this community. And even I had to hesitate and say, wow, I get this now. So it gave me a different spin. Don't you agree, Michael?
I remember.
Good. It gave me a different spin because I was afraid of being trapped in playing this as the angry black woman character, fighting over race, fighting over an issue that would be stereotypical. And when I heard it clearly, I thought, now I can love what people love about this play. I get it, not just because I got it from my character, but I knew that she was aligned to everybody else. So if I played it angry, then what would they, you know, attitude breeds attitude, right? So they would give me that back. And it was a wonderful epiphany for that character to know how to talk to David so that he looked like the idiot. And
yeah, so that he couldn't get up your nose so easily. It's like, yeah. And
Michael was wonderful in telling me that. He was like, don't go high, because he's going to bury himself. And he does it so wonderfully.
Absolutely.
We said, David's going to dig his own grave. You don't have to help him. And he did it beautifully.
I think as I listened to you, the other epiphany I had in rereading the play is one of the teachable things about it is that when your character loses it, the white character loses it, it's about what we don't often acknowledge about ourselves is that we're all human beings, whether we're black or white or yellow or red or whatever. And it was a humanity in it, even though the humanity was gross. But it's also saying to people, we're all alike. We can be loving, we can be angry, we can be of a middle class or upper middle class family and be black and have the same attitudes that a white family would have. That's one of the other levels, I think, of the play, that it is about, look at me, I'm not just a black person, I am a person who cares about the quality of this neighborhood, and just like you do. Yes. So, you know, again, I think it's a play that you can't get it all, I don't think, in one sitting.
I agree with you.
I think you need to come back and see it or read it like I did, because even when I read it, I thought, did I fall asleep when that happened? Because I don't remember that part.
It goes very
But it happened. And so I think to read, those who've seen it, she's got a copy on a PDF she can send to you. Really need to read it, because it brings out other things that as the play passes so quickly you might have missed, or as you came to realize something that you hadn't realized about it once you processed it. So it really is about, we're all fallible. And in some ways we're all alike, even though our experiences have been different and may have brought us to a different place in the same place. So it's about exploring our own prejudices, our own consciences, our own values. And you mentioned my book, but I often talk about values that are timeless and transcendent, because I come out of the civil rights movement. And when I talk to young people, I talk to them about the values that Martin Luther King and others who were in the movement embraced, but they weren't racial values. they were transcendent values that applied to everybody. Judging somebody by the color, the content of their character and not the color of their skin, that's not unique to black people or to white people. So what you see partly in this play are values that we need to ponder, that are timeless, they go on forever, respect for one another, and transcendent, regardless of race, class, or color.
Absolutely.